Do you need a backup recording?
Hi, everybody. This is Donnie Alexander. I'm so glad to be with you this morning for Writer's Chat. I'm joined by lovely co-hosts, Brandy Bro, Melissa Stroh, and Norma Poor, plus our very special guest. So I'm going to turn things over to Norma, who's going to introduce that person for us, who we're so glad to have with us.
Good morning. Julie, we're so glad you're here with us. You are such an encouragement to aspiring writers and just authors around the world. Julie Lavender is our guest, and she is the author of 365 Ways to Love Your Child, Turning Little Moments into Lasting Memories, and that's published by Revell, and also a children's Bible stories for bedtime, published by Penguin Random House imprint. And she recently spoke on a Focus on the Family broadcast about showing love to a child, and she would be honored if you would watch the interview, and I will attach that in the chat. Julie is the author of over 1,000 newspaper and magazine articles, and she has a master's degree in early childhood education, and she's a wife, a mom, and a grandmommy. So Julie, you're with us today to talk about 10 ways to win at Writers Contest. So I'm turning it over to you.
All right, good, thank you. Well, I'm excited to be here, and I will go ahead and say that I never like feeling like I'm the, I don't even like this word, authority on something. I can always speak from what I know, from what I've experienced with that or learned or whatever. So there may be lots of you that have some suggestions and tips and things you can add to it. So I'm excited to be here, and I am excited to share with you. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. I hope
the rest
what
of
I might share.
Well, go ahead.
Did I do it right?
The rest of us, yes, you're good. And the rest of us can minimize so that we're not showing up too, and just leave Julie there with the recording. So thanks, Julie. We are really glad to have you here. And yes, you're shared.
Okay, very good. Okay, so whether you're a new or experienced writer, taking part in a writing contest offers a host of benefits. And here's a few that I have experienced over the years, and some of these are the reasons that I chose to enter a contest. You know, just for the joy of winning. Sometimes that makes us feel good. I don't think that's always in a prideful way. I hope not, but just for the joy of winning. To bring awareness to a published or not yet published project. Like if we're at a writer's contest and, you know, we know that there's editors there and they might hear our name called. For the chance to add award winning to my resume, to contribute to scholarships at a writer's conference. And this is actually my favorite. This is the reason I do it so often at writers' conferences. Sometimes as an impetus to encourage me to finish a project and meet a contest deadline, because if I finish that submission, then it makes me get my project on the way. For a chance to include a win on my manuscript proposal to an editor about the same project. The chance to win a pat on the back affirmation for my writing. And again, I hope that's not prideful. I feel like we need that every now and then. To hopefully pad my one sheet with a win, and maybe to earn kudos from my agent. But step one, of course, for me always is pray. And I think I've shared with you guys before when we had a different session, before I start any of my writing, a new project. Well, I try to do it every day, but especially if I'm starting a new project, I just always pray. I want it to be God's words. I know this is a given. We should feel this way, but I don't know that if I'm in a big hurry, I might forget. So I do try to make sure that that's always my very first step that I do with any of my writing. I kneel at my computer and ask God to fill my cup with the words that He wants me to say, words that will glorify and honor Him, words that will point others to Him, and the words that will bring Him praise. And, I want that writing to be bathed in prayer because I want my words to be His words. So I do this for a writing contest, just like I do for all my other writing projects. And I ask Him to give me the words. Sometimes it might be, okay, what's an idea? I might not know specifically yet an idea I want to enter, but I'll I ask God to give me those words, but I remember to pray for others that are entering. I try not to pray just for myself, as well as the judges and the sponsors, because, you know, whether it's a magazine or a writing conference, then I try to remember those that are being the sponsors of the contest. And this mindset gives me the chance to pray for all of those involved in the process. I try to remember to pray, thy will be done. I teased some of my friends, some of my writing buddies, you know, I do sometimes ask for a favor on my own writing, but I also make sure I say thy will be done. And then I can know that whether or not, you know, I win or lose, then it's all about his great plan for my writing. And, you know, I'll admit that a loss can feel like a rejection and it's difficult, but you know, if I've really prayed about this, then I can know with all certainty that it's all part of the sovereign Lord's plan, because after all, he's sovereign over everything, even our writing contest, as we know. Okay, so step 2, and you may do these in a different order because you may already have an idea for something you want to write. But step 2, usually I'm thinking about the contest that I want to enter. And the reason I try to think about those contests in the beginning is because you need to go ahead and get your deadlines in mind. You know, you can peruse various contest opportunities to determine which contest you want to enter. Most likely you'll be choosing a genre, but it's going to be something that you're familiar with or something that you want to publish. And that genre might be children's picture books, romantic suspense, poetry, devotions, whatever you're used to writing. And you'll especially want to enter contests for the conferences that you plan to attend. And then you can see if there's other places that you want to enter your published or unpublished works. Most of the contests have an entry fee, and that you're going to, and this is another reason why I kind of like to look at them all as a whole to begin with. And I go ahead and jot down what the contest fee is, because then I have to prayerfully consider how many or which ones that I can enter, you know, according to the fees. So I do try to take notes about all these different places that I might consider entering first. And I just have this long spreadsheet of places I want to enter. I especially love entering contests at conferences that I attend, because I think all of them that I attend, that money goes towards scholarships for writers who might otherwise not be able to afford to come to the conference. I've been attending conferences for a long time, but back early in my writing, when I was still homeschooling my children, it was very sporadic. So the more recent, I guess since like 2017 or something like that, I've been going regularly. So when that first writers conference in 2017 that I went to in a very long time, I received a scholarship as a first timer for that conference. And I think it was a C. Murphy scholarship, as a matter of fact. You know, he loves to give back to writers. And it was a partial scholarship. And I was so blessed and so honored to receive that. I vowed then that I wanted to give back to other writers. And so entering contest is my way to do that, because I feel like, yes, I might win something, but I feel like my money is going towards helping other writers get there. And at the time, I didn't even know that much about writers contests. I didn't realize it was going to scholarships until I actually got there and heard that the writers contest fees go to scholarships. And I was so happy about that. You know, there's other places besides conferences that offer a contest, and often those are for published works. I'm going to be talking a little bit more about like unpublished works and attending conferences, because that's probably where I've entered the most. But there are places, of course, where you can enter your articles that are already published or your books. And some of those are contests too, but most of the conferences, but most of those I think are generally unpublished works. And you can look into magazines. There are a lot of magazines that offer writing contest. One of the magazines that you can find information about writing contest is The Writer, W-R-I-T-E-R. My Southern language makes it sound like writer. When I do speak to text, it always says writing, R-I-D-I-N-G, instead of writing. But The Writer, they offer, they have a whole list of, and I just downloaded last night as I was preparing for this. If you go to The Writer, and I guess it's thewriter.com, there was actually a free download of 2021 contests. So I hope to find the 2022, maybe they haven't published it, but there's just a whole bunch of contests there. They listed in just this one long list. Writer's Digest often has a contest. poetry contests. They offer contests a lot through their site as well. So there's just places like that you can find a lot of contests offered. And it's just going to be a matter of how many you can afford, how much time you think you can spend on this, how many you want to send in. So once you figured out this list of the genre you're going to enter, the entry fee, be sure to write down the deadline to enter. And then you can peruse the guidelines. There's going to be a lot of guidelines, so I would not suggest just reading everything thoroughly right then. Just kind of decide which ones you want to enter. And then when you go back, you're going to be reading those a little bit more thoroughly. Another place where one I would like to speak of is the Guidepost Magazine. They offer a contest every 2 years. It's always on the even year. And I did check with an editor, and they are offering it this year because with COVID, 2 years ago, they offered the contest and still did it virtually. The winners still got to participate in this virtual group. But normally during the contest winners, 12 of them, they will go usually to New York and learn more about writing for the contest, or writing for Guidepost. And there's no fee to enter that contest at all. So that's another one that I want to talk a little bit more about that as we go. All right, let me see. I got to figure out how to. Okay, step 3. Sometimes you can find the winning entries from previous years, like for the SELA contest awards. If you go to the Blue Ridge Mountains Christian Writers Conference site, you can often find the winners listed from the previous year. And I like to go back and read, like if it's a published book, a children's book or something, I like to go back and read some of the winners, because you can either find them in your bookstore or at the library. And that way that helps a little bit to know, maybe why they were chosen. You're not going to know that for sure, but you can read the book and see, maybe figure out why it was chosen. But also for the articles, the short articles, the ones that had already been published, the Foundation Awards. No, the Foundation is unpublished. But the winning article awards, you can often find, like, for example, one of my newspaper articles that won a SELA, then you can just Google it by title and that article will come up. So even if you're entering something that's unpublished in an article category, then go read some of those winning article category winners that you can find online, and then you'll get a feel for a little bit maybe of what they're looking for. So see if you can find as many as possible of those to read through, and I think it will help you. It certainly helps me to be able to look back at the others. Okay, step 4, write a superb submission. Obviously, if you're entering something you've already published into a category, then it's already written, and this step won't pertain to you as much, but you can pay attention to it as far as something else you might publish or want to enter later. So brainstorm to decide what you want to write about for the contest. Are you writing a poem, a short story, an article, first couple of chapters of a novel? Make sure to write a stellar submission that will stand out from the stack of entries. Lots of the writings will be good and many of them are going to be great, but you want yours to rise to the top. You want it to be magnificent and stand out above any of those others. Give the judges something that will make them smile, laugh, or maybe even cry. And whatever you plan to write, ponder some of these questions as you write. Is my idea fresh and unique? Will the title match the expectations of my reader? Did I start my novel with a riveting, attention-grabbing scene? Did I start my nonfiction work with a hook that will grab the reader? Is my writing strong? Did I eliminate passive sentences and write with active ones? And that's a tough one for me, but that's a biggie. Are my paragraphs written coherently? Can my reader follow my train of thought logically? Do I keep the same POV, point of view, in each chapter of my novel? Do the steps or order of my nonfiction paragraphs make sense to the reader? Does the ending of the novel satisfy my reader? Is the ending too predictable? Does the nonfiction takeaway offer a powerful action step for the reader? Are the characters well-rounded? Are we invested in the characters? Does each character, primary and secondary, have their own distinct, unique voice? Is there a definitive story arc? Does tension remain throughout the story? Does the protagonist grow and change in the story? Do the events in the story ring true to the setting, and are those events plausible for that time frame? Is the storyline easy to follow? And those are, I'm sure you have a lot more questions that you put your manuscripts through, but those are just some that I thought of as I tried to proof and read my work. So step 5, proofread and edit. And I know you guys are used to doing this, but read, reread, read it again. And then I try to write my stuff far enough in advance that I can then let it rest and then come back and read it again. I don't always do that, but when I do, I find that I find some mistakes, and I find that I knew what I wanted to say and I had left out some important fact that way. So hopefully if you have time to just put it in a drawer for several days or a week and then come back to it again, you'll find some things that you would like to change. And I think, once again, this may be Cease Murphy again. You can tell I've taken several of his classes. At some point though, you have to remind yourself, this is as good as I can get this at this point in my writing career, because we could just edit and edit and edit and just never stop. So at some point we do have to say, this is as good as I can get it right now, and I'm going to turn it in or I'm going to stop editing. Okay, step 6, get a critique from a writing buddy. And of course, I'm always going to encourage word weavers. I'm a member of a word weavers group, and I think I saw that some of my friends joined in, and I just wouldn't take anything for that group. And I do appreciate the critiques that I get from them. So it's helpful if you can get somebody to look at it and say, hey, I'm thinking of entering this in the such and such contest. Will you help me see where I can make improvements or see what I can work on? It always helps to get a fresh pair of eyes on your work. Okay, follow the guidelines to the letter. The thing about most writers' conferences, contests, there's a lot of similarities, but every single one is so different. And this is what I was talking about. If you just read all those guidelines first when you're trying to choose everything, you might get so bogged down. Now, obviously, you've got to read them well enough to know if it's one you can enter. But when you get ready to enter, then it's so important to come back and just make sure you read every single detail. There's just different things for each one, and I read them a dozen times to make sure. We're going to go through an example here. This is for the Florida Christian Writers Contest, and I just pulled this straight from the website. So first of all, I don't know if Eva wrote this or who wrote it, but it's just a great encouraging way to get you to want to enter a contest. Are you ready to be an award-winning author or writer? Submit to our contest and you may hear your name called at our awards program Saturday night. Please note that if an entry has been entered into a previous Florida Christian Writers Conference contest and won, it may not be entered again. And that's important because you don't want to waste your time. However, if the piece did not win first place, it may be entered again, but the second time is the final opportunity for that piece to be entered. And see, I think that's totally different with other conferences too. So that's an important note to keep that in mind. And then the very next thing are the categories. See, there's all these different categories that you can enter, and each one has its specific. So in articles, for a nonfiction article, it cannot be any more than 1,000 words. And excuse me, you really have to follow these rules, because I don't know specific to each conference, but I have heard that if you don't follow the rules, then you're just kicked out for not following the rules. I don't know that the money is returned, and I don't even know that they tell you all these things. And I get that. I totally understand. They don't have time for all of that. If we can't follow the directions, I don't think they have time to treat us like elementary school students and say, well, here's why you didn't follow the directions, and here's why I can't send you your money back or whatever. So the point is just be real cautious to pay attention to the directions. Their time is too busy to be able to fiddle with each one of us if we can't follow the directions. For Bible studies, you need an outline plus the first 1,000 words. It's just so different for each category, for each conference. This might be one of the biggest, most important parts. I mean, yes, your writing needs to be stellar, but even if your writing is stellar and you don't follow the directions, then you're not even going to be considered. So this is just I'm just emphasizing this a lot. because it's just so very important. A children's early reader, they need a summary plus 500 words. And I've entered some children's stuff before that did not need a summary. So that's important to pay attention to. Children's picture books, they need the entire work, no graphics. Devotionals, and these get kind of tricky because, well, they want the Bible verse, a short prayer, inspirational saying, plus up to 3 devotionals that are up to 300 words each. So I think this is in the foundation. This is not yet published works, but some of the like for the Selahs, you can enter devotions that you've written, and you can enter 3 devotions, and they can be from different areas, but it's still just one entry. So even the published devotionals is completely different than the not yet published devotions. Flash fiction, a short story of no more than 1,000 words. They want the whole piece. Middle grade books, fiction or nonfiction, a paragraph description first, plus 1,000 words. Same thing for the nonfiction, a paragraph description, plus the first 1,500 words. And, you know, obviously you wouldn't get kicked out for if you have less than 1,500. But if you don't read that carefully and you think, okay, I can only send in 1,000 words, then you're kind of giving yourself a disadvantage because you didn't allow yourself the first 1,500 words. You know, it's just so important to keep up with all of these. So for novels, they have all those different categories that you have to indicate, whether it's contemporary women's, historical, etc. For that, they want a 1-paragraph description plus the first 1,500 words. Poetry can be 3 poems, single spaced. You know, I have no idea if they kick you out if you're double spaced. I don't really know. But if they ask for single spaced, then just give it to them. You know, you don't want that to be the reason you're disqualified. No more than 1 page per poem. For a short story, that work of fiction can be no more than 7,500 words. They want a 1-paragraph description plus the 1,500 words for that. YA fiction, you can see there, 1-paragraph description, 1,500 words. Same thing for YA nonfiction. Okay, and then next on those guidelines, right after that chart, right after that very helpful chart with all that good information, she tells you exactly where to send it. Email your submissions as an attachment. Do not put the submission into the body of the email. And it goes to Taryn, our dear friend Taryn. Needs to be a Word document. And she points out to us that this is an industry standard. I guess she didn't want anybody to say, well, can't I just use so-and-so? She's just going to go ahead and tell you right off the bat. It's an industry standard. There's where you mail it. Has to be received no later than September 30th. And we were just talking about the Postal Service. So you know what? Give it plenty of time. Give it plenty of time. Now, and this one says receive no later than, so that you especially have to. Some I have entered will say, make sure it's postmarked by such and such date. That's real important to know too. You've got to pay attention to those words, because if I had misread that and thought it said, as long as it was postmarked by September 30th, then I'm kicked out from the very beginning because it has to arrive by September 30th. Then she goes on to say, each unpublished, uncontracted submission must include a cover sheet with your name, email address, title of your work, and category entered. Each page after should not include your name or any telltale evidence of the author. Double spaced, Times New Roman, font size 12 with 1-inch margins. And you know, all these things sound so specific, and you're like, well, my goodness, why does it have to be this way? Well, you know what? If we're going to send in a manuscript proposal, or if we're going to send a query letter to an agent or an editor, we have these specifics we have to follow anyway. So we might as well learn while we're getting ready for a contest, and then that will help us then too. Multiple submissions accepted, but not within the same category. And then include a check for $25 made payable to Word Weavers International for each category entered. You may write 1 check. And you must be registered for the conference to enter. Okay, let me see if that's all. I can't remember what my next. Okay, and then she also, at the bottom, she has this little note: the judges reserve the right to switch the category for an entry. And that's happened to me before. You know, if they don't get enough entered into one particular genre, then they're going to put those few in with another genre. And, it's all still going to be fair. I have respected every decision they've made about that. I've never said, oh, well, I don't want them to be judged in that. So, they're making the wisest decisions for the attendees. So I've never questioned any of that whatsoever. They might have to cancel a category if the number of entries is insufficient. And they go ahead and tell you, they might decide not to have a winner if the level of the best entries is not up to publishing industry standards, because we want these to be reputable awards, so we don't want them just to give awards out just for the sake of saying we've got to give an award in this category, because we do want them to always be reputable, when we enter a contest. All right, and I think there's one more thing. And she also leaves this note: if you're under contract or have previously published within a genre, you may not enter that genre. For example, if you've published or are under contract in children's picture books, you are ineligible to submit a children's picture book. And then there's this disclaimer: individual pieces of poetry and devotionals are an exception to this rule. Okay, so you can see that there's just so many specifics, and this is just one conference. This is the Florida Christian Writers Conference, and I've enjoyed submitting several things to them before and love the fact that it does go to scholarships. But there's several things to know there, and so you're just going to have to be super careful to pay attention to each one of those specific details. Okay, step 8, celebrate a win or a loss. And those of you that know me, my go-to is always ice cream. I always say celebrate with ice cream. So celebrate a win with ice cream. Use that win as a confidence-building affirmation of your work. Celebrate, but obviously don't gloat. That wouldn't be Christ-like for us to do that. Give God the glory and be sure to thank others involved in the contest. Allow the loss to celebrate the loss with ice cream. See, I celebrate both. And keep the loss in perspective. Allow that loss to help you refocus. Perhaps you need to rework the entry, or perhaps you need to retire it, or maybe work on something new. Perhaps you need to study the writing craft more extensively in the genre that you entered. Now, here's the thing about so many of the writers' contests, and I do understand this as well. Most of the time, you don't get any feedback. There are some that will give you like a rubric back from the judges. I think the Oregon conference does do that. I've never been able to go there, but I've checked into it several times. So you get like a judge's sheet back, and it will give you some of those helpful tips. There are some other contests that I've read about that you can that you get some information about, but for the most part, they just don't have the time or the energy or the people to give you that information. So I said, let these losses teach you something. You're not going to know specifically, oh, my characters weren't deep enough. My people weren't invested in my characters. I didn't do the POV right. We're not going to know those things, but it can show us that, okay, for some reason this time I did not impress a judge. So let me study the craft a little bit more, and then, or either ask another writing buddy, to look at it again with you. But so celebrate either those wins or the losses. And another thing I was talking to a friend about, the other thing we have to accept is that the judges are human. They're usually fellow writers like us. Now, granted, they are much more experienced and probably professional writers, but they're still human. And the judging is still subjective. So that's why I say keep that loss in perspective. Maybe, just maybe, your writing was a little bit better than the winners, but for whatever reason, the sovereign Lord chose that person to win. Maybe it was their time to be lifted up. Maybe they needed the affirmation a little bit more than you. I mean, I'm not trying to discount anything the judges do, because I think they're always just superb, and I think they do a marvelous job. But I don't think we should let a loss deter us, make us, beat ourselves up or anything like that. Accept it for what it is, learn from it, and, move on. And this is a time when we ask ourselves, okay, why are we really writing? What is my why for writing? Am I writing for the Lord, or am I writing for that pat on the back or a win at a contest? If we just give up after we don't necessarily win something at a contest, and that might be God's plan. God might have another ministry involved for you, but seriously and prayerfully think about that. I never want someone to give up just because they didn't win a contest. There's different reasons. The Lord may have chosen someone else, or you might need to study the craft a little bit more. But if you're writing for the Lord, you're touching somebody's life. You know what? You may have you might not have won anything in that category, but you have no idea how you touched that particular judge's life or heart with something you said in there. You could have had a profound message that judge needed to hear at just that moment. So just think about your why. Think about why you're writing and who you're writing for and who your audience is, our audience of one. And just keep all those things in mind with a contest. Be sure to congratulate the winners, whether you win or lose. Congratulate all the others. Sometimes it's nice to share that on Facebook, share that with them on Facebook to congratulate them, or in another social media. And remember, just don't give up. Just keep trying. Be sure to keep in mind that ultimately God is in control and his plans are best and always for our good. Some of the verses that helps me to keep this in mind, I have several of those. For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you hope and a future. And we know that for those who love God, all things work together for good, for those who are called according to his purpose. Romans 8:28. For my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways, declares the Lord. As the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts. That's in Isaiah. Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways submit to him, and he will make your paths straight. And one more, commit your work to the Lord and your plans will be established. Proverbs 16:3. So those are, I know you know those verses, but those are really helpful to me when, whether I win or whether I lose. Okay, step 9, keep winning with the win. Perhaps the biggest benefit of entering a writing contest is that you just might place in the contest and you might win a certificate or a medal or a plaque and get to walk across the stage and be congratulated. That the affirmation that someone loves your work, likes your work, enjoyed your work, this affirmation might be just the encouragement you need to keep writing, to give you a confidence to keep pursuing the craft of writing. But a contest win also allows you to keep winning in other ways. And sometimes these are some really fun ones to move forward with in your writing journey. A contest win gives you the gives you the opportunity to call yourself an award-winning author. Now, I'll admit, I think we're kind of overusing that these days because, there's just a lot of award-winning authors out there. But let's face it, you won an award, and so you are an award-winning author, and it is true. You can claim that. Be sure to add the win to your resume or query letter to an editor or agent. And, not in a boastful way. That's always so hard for me. And I've shared this with my friends so much. We're kind of expected to toot our own horns and remain humble all at the same time. And when we're sending something to an editor or to an agent, we can find a way to boast on those awards to let them know that our writing has been affirmed by other people. And because we do want to be a good steward of the words that God has given us that helped us write that article or story that helped us win the contest. But at the same time, I just know it's tough to keep that balance of being humble, but yet making sure that you announce those things to an editor so that perhaps they will be willing to check into your writing a little further. So it's always great to be able to add that to your resume and to your query letters. Winning a contest, or actually just even entering one, makes you a winner too, because it helps you learn how to follow those guidelines. Sometimes I think entering a contest is even more confusing than sending in a manuscript proposal or a query letter. And if you can master that, then you can follow those other directions, and it'll almost make it a little easier to put together your manuscript proposal. But you'll need that whether you're working with magazine editors or newspaper editors or book editors or agents. You need to learn how to follow their guidelines and their directions. And to me, that experience in itself is invaluable. You can share the win on social media to gain more exposure for your writing and to add credibility to your writing journey. And obviously, again, I'm not encouraging a prideful kind of boasting. When I do win a contest, I have a hard time, because my first thought is I really want to recognize the sponsors for the contest. I want to recognize the conference that I just attended. I want to recognize some of the other winners. But at the same time, I don't want it to sound like, hey, look at me, I won this award. So I try to find a way in my writing, and I hope I do it okay, but I try to find a way to give God the glory, to give him all the thanks and the credit, and to point to the others, because ultimately my goal is to encourage more to attend another writers conference. Or, I just love the writers conferences that I attend, and I want others to be able to go, to be able to learn to be a better writer, to meet editors and agents. And so I'm going to try to tout that conference or the sponsor of the contest in that manner. But it does help to be able to lend more credibility towards your writing, which ultimately might help you to get a contract or help with more book sales. It's an interesting journey we have to go on, but I do suggest sharing those wins in a positive way, recognizing others, just giving God the glory, bottom line. And keep those wins and losses in perspective. Keep a humble heart with a win, a humble and grateful heart with a win, and let the loss give you the determination to try a little harder, to teach you valuable lessons about those impending rejections. Because, when we get a loss from a writer's contest, maybe that is just a lesson in learning about rejections. Because if you follow this writing journey, if you keep writing, you all know we're going to get rejections when we send something to an editor or an agent. And it's just part of the writing journey, and we learn not to give up that way. And then step 10 is to enter. Once you've thought through all these things, once you've decided where you wanted to enter a contest, once you've prayerfully thought about how many you could afford or which ones you could afford, then consider sending them in and just go for it. Some people might think, I'm not ready to enter a contest, but you just never know. You never know, and you won't know until you enter the contest. I do have a list of several so most writers conferences offer contests, but a lot of them you have to attend to go. And I had someone ask me about, they said conferences, they have to be careful with that because of the cost as well. But there are several you do not have to attend to enter, like the Blue Ridge Mountains Christian Writers Conference. You can enter the SALAs and the Foundation Awards without attending. Follow the guidelines correctly, but you can enter those without attending. I know that the Oregon Conference, that's called, they call theirs the Cascade Awards, and you can enter there without attending, and you do get those guide sheets back from the rubric sheet or something like that. I forgot what they called it. Maybe the judge's comments, something like that. And you actually get that back. So those are all the things that you're going to want to weigh to see which ones you can enter, which ones might be better. There's a lot of smaller conferences. Right now, there's virtual conferences that you can enter, and or conferences that you can attend virtually and then enter a contest that way. So there are a lot of places to enter these contests, and it's a lot of fun. It's kind of like a little challenge for me. I do enjoy it. I think there's a lot of benefits aside from just the ones we've even mentioned. You've probably heard Bethany tell her story, but Bethany Jett and my agent Kyle Young, that's how they first joined forces for Serious Writer. They competed in a contest together, and I think they jokingly tease one another about, they don't remember who won second or third. Each one claims to have won second, but they don't remember that. But that's what led to them joining forces with, Kyle had been working on Almost an Author, Bethany, serious writer, and they joined forces, and look at how wonderful that partnership has been and how much we've all learned from them. So, there's just way more benefits than just entering the contest and getting a win. But I do think it's a valuable experience, and I've learned a lot and had a great time with it. So that's what I wanted to share. If anybody has any questions, if I can figure out how to get out of the screen, but if anybody has any questions, I don't know that I can answer them, but if anybody has any other comments, I would welcome your comments. Again, do try to enter the Guidepost contest. And I don't have it on there, but what I can do is that handout that I had already prepared with some of the other places to enter contests. I'll make sure I put the guidelines. I don't know that they've posted them yet, is the reason I didn't have those. They usually post them in their magazine in April, but you can find it on their website. The deadline is usually in June. They usually announce the winners in August, and then in October is when the winners get to go to wherever or have a virtual conference and meet, and they teach you about writing for Guidepost. So that's a really fun one to enter.
I have a question.
Okay.
Can we get a copy of your PowerPoint?
Yes, because I talk fast when I get nervous and excited. So I will be happy to, if it's not too much trouble, I can send all of my notes, and I can send that sheet as well with the list of the conferences.
I just want to thank you for your heart. You have such a heart for God, and I think I've learned a lot from you just about attitude, the attitude of entering contests. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. I hope I always want it to be right, and I really I feel like it is because of these the scholarships. That's just so important to me. And every now and then people will talk about, when they call up these. I know Eva used to, at the Florida conference, she would have people who had received a scholarship stand up. And I was always amazed at the number of people that stood because they had gotten a scholarship. And that just warms my heart so much.
Everybody come back on if you'd like to. We've got some people coming on. I think one of the big discussions going on right now in chat towards the end is so important about just being disappointed if you don't win, and so you don't enter contest because you're that fear. And I kind of want to take us back to what Julie said almost at the beginning of her presentation about wrapping these things in prayer. And I loved what you said. I wrote it down. Thy will be done, and winning may or may not be part of God's grand plan for your journey, but he has a plan, and that's right. What's most important is he has a plan. And so I've done this too. Let fear keep me from doing things. I think we all do it. We all fall prey to it. But Brandy is encouraging people, just feed into your competitive side, do it. The thing of it is, if you don't enter, guess what? You have a 100% chance of not winning.
That's exactly right. And I know I keep harping on this, but that's why, there's some contests you enter. And now there are a lot of those that I suggested, like if you look into the Writer Magazine and Writer's Digest, now those contests, though they are legitimate, they're for profit. There may be thousands of entries and the fee is nominal, $20, $25, whatever, $15. That's nominal, but they have thousands of entries. They're making money. They're not doing anything wrong. It's just that I've never entered those because I think the chances are great that, mine might not rise to the top in whatever fashion. But my point is, for a writer's contest, if I don't lose, I don't feel like I've wasted my money because it went to a scholarship. I might have second thoughts about entering just a bunch from Writer's Digest or Writer until I just really worked on my craft or whatever. But I may be disappointed, but yet I'm never thinking, boy, I threw away that money. I'm so excited to know that took a writer to the contest. So when we put it in that kind of perspective, then we're still giving back to the Lord. I'm writing for the Lord, but I'm still giving back to him because I sent another writer to the conference.
That's a great way to look at it too. Yeah, Pam.
And that's the reason I entered the first contest for Rome Makers I entered, because I thought I was going to donate to the scholarship fund anyway.
Yeah.
This was back in 2015. And it was, you entered the contest and they had guidelines. It was to write a short story and they were putting an anthology together. And I thought, all I want to do is go far enough to get my story in the book, because that could be very cool, because I don't write short stories. And I didn't expect anything. And I got through the first round and got my judging notes and, did revisions and all. And I thought, this is kind of cool. Got through the second round, ended up in the final round. I was like, what? And all because I just wanted to donate to the scholarship fund. And I didn't win the grand prize, but I got into the anthology and I won Reader's Choice.
Wow.
So
Congratulations.
you don't know, right? I mean,
You don't know.
You don't know. And it's like you, all I wanted to do was give money for the scholarship fund. I thought, I'll give it a try. Why not? So, you never know. It's worth trying.
I know Ben had a question way back here, and Ben, are you still on here?
He asked if, Julie, if you budget for contest entry fees.
Thank you.
You know what? I do. And I'm friends with Ben, so I don't mind answering him later if he had to jump up. Oh, no, there he is. There he is. Ben, I do try to do that. I try to think a big picture, like, okay, this is the amount of money I can spend on marketing my book. And that's part of it for me. It's just to budget a certain for the contest. And I just consider it as part of my marketing.
There's so many that are out there. And, do you have like a plus and minus thing? The entry cost might be $95 because you missed the deadline of early entry. Does that,
You know what? That's a good point, Ben. Some of the ones where you can send in for contests, if you already have a published work, like Ben has his great books about animals, check that deadline, because they'll have several different deadlines. They'll have an early bird fee. And if you miss that deadline, it's going to be $20 more. If you miss that deadline, it's $25 more or whatever. So pay attention to those. I can't do a lot of those that are that expensive. That gets to be a bit much. And another thing I didn't point out, again, these are legitimate contests, but they are, once you win, and I just won, and I think maybe it was the Illumination Award. I did enter that. I won a silver with my children's Bible stories for bedtime. And then
right now.
And
Sorry.
then you got and then I got an email about, for this package, we can market your book with for so-and-so. Well, just, I don't ever do those extra packages, because my goodness, I think the cheapest package was over $500.
right?
So it was not that it was not a legitimate contest, but they do often then want to help market your book afterwards. And I don't have any idea whether or not that would have been beneficial to me. I just couldn't afford the over $500. So I appreciate the award, but I couldn't go any farther than that at all.
Thank you, Julie.
I think too, if you support the conferences that you like to go to, those are the good contests to enter, especially if you're just getting started. You're going to that conference anyway, consider entering the contest that it's proposing. And of course, if you write fiction, I have to mention the American Christian Fiction Writers Contest. They have several, one for Unpublished. I think there are 3 altogether. The Genesis contest, and isn't there a shorter one? I forget now what it's called. And I will tell you too, I can give you this perspective, because I used to be a coordinator for a category in the Genesis contest. I did that like 3 or 4 years. So I knew the scores of each project from the judges. And, even though there is a rubric and there's guidelines for judging and all of that, there is, of course, still that subjectiveness that comes into it. And I know I've mentioned this before in different writers chat episodes, but since we're talking about contests, I'll say it here too. So at different times, sometimes it was like the top 10, sometimes it's like top 12, whatever it was, there would be the first set to go through. And I will tell you, very rarely did those top people have all 3 terrific scores. Usually it was 2 really good scores and then kind of a low score. And so the average score might be in the 80s. So if you get yours back and you think, oh my gosh, the 80s, that's horrible. No, it's not. It really wasn't. And then it was interesting as it would go through and they would narrow it down. And I was coordinator for contests where the bottom half were the ones that ended up going to the top. Say there were 10 semifinalists, and the finalists came out of the bottom of that half, not the top. So, just different judges, and it switched it. So, a lot of it does just depend on who you happen to get as a judge and how hard that judge is. And, I don't know. It was always very interesting to me to see how there was a consistency, but yet within that consistency, there was an inconsistency, I guess.
Right.
Way to say it.
And I guess the only way to look at that is, that's kind of life. So if we just, I guess if we think negatively about that and think, oh, well, I don't want to enter if that's the case. But then, like you said, 100% failure rate if you don't enter. So
Exactly. Yeah. I'm sorry. Pam was talking about judges who said they don't read fantasy in her situation. I agree. If you don't read it, I don't think you should be judging it. Sometimes, though, there aren't enough judges. So, I mean, if you can volunteer to be a judge, like if you are an ACFW member, they seek judges for those contests. Now, as it goes up, then the professional level of those judges becomes different than, they're published authors.
But you don't get up that far if you don't get a high enough score.
I will tell you though, that is very typical, even though outside of fantasy, to have 2 really super good scores or very good scores, and then one that's just that happens all the time.
Yeah. I read for Realm Awards every year, and they ask us, what we enjoy. And I know that sometimes we're shorthanded. And the one year I'm like, I don't read horror at all. I don't enjoy it, or science fiction for the most part. But last year they begged, please, we need one more. I said, all right. So I went at it as, how would I judge this and read this book if I were an avid sci-fi reader? What would I look for? And I judged it on that. And I wouldn't, I didn't care. I still wouldn't go back and read it for enjoyment for the most part. But I wanted to be fair, so that's what I did. I looked at the other synopsis of the first 2 books, because it was a trilogy. It was the last one. And then I said, if I'm reading sci-fi, what do I want to hear or read? What do I want to be entertained by? What do I want to see? And that's what I did. So.
Well, because good writing is good writing. If there's a character arc,
exactly,
story growth, it really doesn't matter the genre. What was hard for me when I would have to judge something that I wasn't that familiar with is not always knowing the expectations of that genre. And so I tried to be very careful with that though, and would not judge low just because I wasn't a fan necessarily of that genre. Barb, you had your hand up and you're muted. Did you have something you wanted to ask or comment on?
I just wonder, I think it might be getting answered as we're having discussion, but can you enter the same piece in several contests at the same time?
Yes. And I was trying to think, I never want to answer without being sure, but I know that I did. And I've read through guidelines, and I've never, up to this point, unless they change, I've never seen any guideline that says, if you've entered it in another conference, do not enter here. So as far as I know, I think you can enter, and I have entered the same one in several different conferences before.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
I would agree. We've got a couple other questions. Chris asks, can you comment on previously published restrictions? I am new to writing fiction. I have 2 picture books under contract, 1 published. Can I still submit in other fiction categories when the rules say unpublished?
That's my understanding, and read the guidelines completely carefully. But usually my understanding is if you have not published in that area, in that genre, in that category, then yes, you can. And the only reason I'm hesitating with that now is because some of them have changed it. Even if you've published on a blog, but I think that was more related to articles. So like if you're entering a women's fiction category, but you have children's books published, yes, as long as you're not published in that particular genre anywhere. And I know that will be different than a blog, because a blog, you might write about issues for women, but that wouldn't necessarily be that. But yes, you can, but you have to be real careful about that when it comes to articles or something like that, because they are now counting anything, blog, devotion, anything online. I'm pretty sure it's considered published now.
Yeah, and there is the suggestion to ask, like if you don't know for sure, you've read the guidelines 3 times and still can't find the answer, there usually is a contact person, and they kind of need to know if they're be nice about it. Just say I wasn't
right.
sure. But maybe that
I almost,
yeah.
And I almost suggested that. And then I thought, oh my gosh, I don't want Eva or Taryn to get 1 million. So
yeah.
my suggestion to that is, if you've read the guidelines 10 times and you still can't understand, they are wonderful. They are fabulous. It's just that they're not going to want you to message them and say, now what font are we supposed to use? Because by golly, that was clearly in the directions. So if it's confusing, I have messaged them and I've been very apologetic. I would say, I'm so sorry. I hate to bother you. I hope this is okay. I just need this clarification right here. So yes, respect their time and email them. They are fabulous. And so are the ones from Blue Ridge. Those are the 2 conferences I go to most often, but I go to others, and no one has ever been unkind and said, I am not going to answer that question because you didn't read the directions. So
so if a book is under contract, is it published or unpublished in the contest size?
I think now they're saying if it's under contract, it is considered published, and you can't be in that category as well.
I remember one little stickler in the details is I was submitting to some contests, and I paid attention to the date. I did not pay attention to the time or the time zone. And
good point.
I blew it because I didn't realize I got it in by that date, but I didn't get it in the right time or the right time zone. And it was when I was first trying this, and it was just so heartbreaking that I messed it up by that much.
That's a good point. That's a very good point. I have almost run into that same, because sometimes it might be, 11:59 a.m. California time. And well, I guess it would have to go the other way because I could have caught it by that. But yes, that's exactly right. So pay attention to every single detail. I mean, sometimes I like to print it out and highlight those important facts, because you can run them all together. The conferences just run together,
Also, that's what I would tell my kids when they were trying to turn in digital assignments at college. Said, expect something to go wrong. I mean, if you wait until the last minute, what if your downloading is glitchy?
I've had that problem too when I almost missed the deadline, because who thinks about you running out of ink cartridge? And I was going to print something out, and I already had it organized. I was going to print it out, then I was going to make a mad dash to the post office. And instead I was out of printer ink. I tried to have an extra copy or extra, whatever that thing is. And so I had to run to Walmart, get that, come back home. So yes, plan for your child to hit a deer that morning. It's going to happen.
Not too long ago, I went to a printer shop to print out 35 pages and didn't realize until it was finishing, I'd forgotten to check the paper size, and it was set for poster size paper.
Oh my.
It was $12 wasted.
Oh,
I
boy.
didn't realize that when I was typing it in, something I had submitted, the fonts were different colors, and I didn't see it because of my screen or whatever. And I submitted, and it just looks unprofessional.
Mhm.
I mean,
That's right.
I always try to put the best foot forward, and I was, again, devastated.
Well, and I'd like to comment about losing or not winning in a contest. And for me, I entered a piece like 3 different times at Blue Ridge and the North Carolina Writers Conference. And it didn't win, but each time it made me go back and reevaluate what I submitted. And I reworked it, and I had somebody else critique it, not somebody that usually critiques my things, so they, maybe would have a different perspective. And I took all of that in and then reworked the piece, and then I submitted it last year to Blue Ridge, and it won 2nd place.
Yay.
So, use those opportunities of not winning to learn and to tweak your work, and maybe have people that don't usually look at your work, that maybe are familiar with your voice and know how you write. Get somebody that doesn't know all that to look at your work, and they'll give you good feedback as to how to make it better.
That's great advice.
And that's just what we need to do with everything we're trying to send to an editor anyway, or an agent or whatever. If one publishing house turns it down, then perhaps it needs work. So it's just all preparation, I think, for this wonderful writing journey that we're on.
There is one contest that I regularly submit to, and I got an honorable mention once, and it just spurred me to keep trying and trying and trying, because I'm like, I want to win. I want to win. So I got that competitive thing going on, and I'm in a small group of writers where we kind of, talk about it, and there's 2 others in this little group that have won in this contest. I'm like, I just got to keep going, But the neat thing about doing, a contest regularly like that is that you generate work. And generating work is never a bad thing. So if you get discouraged by the rejection, always remember that you have a piece of work. If it's not like a contest that, already published and you're submitting it, and you have to generate something new for this contest, most likely you can take that entry and you can continue working it afterwards if it doesn't win, and submit it for publication in other places. Then you have something that you can do, something to do with it, you know what I mean? So entering contests is a great way to generate new work, and the rejection is not necessarily bad because you have something to do with it. So there's always a positive in entering contests.
I agree too.
All right, great. Chris, we're going to do one more question, and then we're going to talk about next week. Chris says, is there a resource for contests that you can submit only once? For example, Christian Book Marketing, I think I have that correct, has a cutoff date in September based on books published by that date, that year, that kind of thing, by that date. Okay. Chris, I'm honestly not sure. I would just be checking as many different resources and lists as you could find.
Christian Writers Market Guide is good too. I have an online subscription now. I love holding a book in my hand, but I have an online subscription because it's easy to search. But Christian Writers Market Guide has a whole section of contests. I have not used it to find the contest for me to enter, but it has those, and it will have all those different specifics, like the book has to be published from January to December of one year. Sometimes it's September to August of, so that even gets more confusing. The stuff that's your work that's already published. Then I know I missed a deadline. I wanted to send my children's Bible story book into a contest, but I missed that deadline because I thought it was January and it wasn't. It was December, because it was supposed to have been for the calendar year of 22. So I think that's where I get angry with myself. I don't get upset with the losses as much as when I just mess up like that purely because I did not read carefully enough.
Yeah.
Something that we can do is, I've thought about this, I just haven't done it, is we can take a list of contests for a year and project for the next year and write ourselves a contest calendar so that we know when to anticipate when they're coming. And then we can write on that calendar, okay, work by this date, choose ones you want to do and work by this date, submit by this date. So you give yourself a buffer and you know what to expect, and maybe work that into like a marketing calendar if you have one of those. But that's a good way to kind of keep track of it. And another good place to find contests, especially if you write for the general market or you like literary, that's Submittable. They have a lot of stuff on it.
I think that link is somewhere in the chat too. So, and in case you don't know it, you can save the chat. Melissa saves it and puts it in the group, but you can save it as well. Brandy, could you go ahead then? Julie, first, let me thank you. This was tremendous and great discussion. Thanks, congrats on all your successes and your losses. We'll celebrate. But thank you for the experiences that you were able then to share with us. And I think this has been very encouraging. And then Brandy, I'm going to turn it to you to talk about next week.
Yeah, so next week we have a Come Write With Us session on poetry. And we will have two special guests who will be leading that next week, more than me. So that will be Patricia and, oh goodness, brain cramp, Rachel. Rachel Colby and Patricia Tiffany Morris will be here with us. So they are going to talk a little bit about poetry. Did you know there's like over 150 forms of poetry? And no, they're not going to talk about every single one because there's not time. Not next week. Next week, it's a workshop. So come plan to think about creativity and poetry, and you might be surprised. So I just invite you to come and join us for a fun time of learning and writing about poetry.
Even if you don't want to be a poet, there is so much good about bending the mind that way and learning about
showing. Poetry is showing, and showing is the basis of writing. So yeah, absolutely. It's a great exercise for any writer.
My very first
nonfiction or fiction
were poetry, believe it or not. And I haven't written a poem in like 20 years, but those were my first first
I have whole blogs of poems.
All right, I'm going to stop the recording. If you're watching us on the replay, we're really glad to have you. Please feel free to join us any Tuesday, 11 o'clock Eastern, 10 o'clock Central, and to join our Facebook group. Check out our Facebook page for all of our past episodes. And again, Julie, thank you so much. And thanks to everybody for being here. We appreciate you all so much too. And we'll see you next week on Writer's Chat.